All right, today is Monday, September 8th, and we're talking about Salesforce and how you don't even need to be a customer to have your data compromised. So what are you supposed to do? We're getting into that. Drift, Salesloft, Salesforce, third-party risk, supply chain compromise.
This is the DTF Cyber Podcast. I'm Damian.
This is Troy.
And it's your boy, Fern. Let's go. But before we get into today,
We got a guest.
we have a guest, and I have an introduction ready.
Uh-oh.
From the firewalls of Maricopa to the halls of ASU, he's the phishing smashing, malware crashing, zero-day slaying legend, the unbreakable firewall, the guardian of cyberspace. Give it up for the one, the only, Lester Godsey.
That's good. What do you think? Is that
I'll take it.
you'll take it?
Okay.
I mean, I'd say probably the only person I know that's retired and then started a job the very next day.
So, ever since previous podcasts, I've gotten so much crap from the community. And to be clear here, the record was always that I was going to retire from the state retirement system but continue to work.
Yeah.
So somehow in the course of that dialogue, something was lost in translation.
No. So okay, what was your retirement span? Was it like a day?
8 hours, literally.
Was it 8 hours really?
Yeah, except it was always the intention that I was going to transition from a public servant and then dip my toes in the private sector. So I wasn't planning on taking much of a break. But ASU made an offer that I couldn't pass up. And it's just such a unique opportunity to kind of do something different than this and that malinformation, right, from my Maricopa County stint. So
Yeah. So for those of you listening, watching, you're not local here in our area. Lester's been a staple in this community, really, trying to advocate for security, multiple leadership roles in security, and currently CISO for Arizona State University.
One of the largest public schools in America, right?
by enrollment, I believe we're the largest.
Oh, yeah. Even here in Vegas, Lester has a reputation. You know, I met Lester through my good friend Brent Watkins at the FBI here in Vegas. And, Lester's been very influential across the Southwest. So thank you for your service, first of all. And second of all, congratulations on this new role in retirement.
Well, thank you very much. Coming from you, that means a lot for sure.
If it came from me, it wouldn't really mean. It was like, yeah, cool, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Troy says that it elevates it.
Yeah. Birthday change. Happy birthday, because today is Happy Third Party Risk Day. And we're partying, people. We got the speakers, we got the chains, we got the hats. It's a birthday party. And today, the breach breakdown. We don't normally say the word breach in here, but today, it's necessary.
I think, if you look back, how many CISOs do you know? How many practitioners and how many people in their careers? We talk about career a lot here. How many people say, yeah, third-party risk, I want to do that. You know, it's always, I want to be a red teamer. I want to work in the SOC. I want to do something fun. Like, you never hear somebody say, I want to be in TPRM. But yet, if you look back at our 6 previous podcasts, some part of third-party risk is in almost every discussion. And today you're going to hear a lot about it. But seriously, I think we should be talking about third-party risk a whole lot differently and making it a little bit more exciting so people want to go in and do it.
Yeah, risk in itself. I don't think people come out of school and say, I want to just study risk and I want to be a risk analyst. How many people say that?
And I think that's a great point, because if you look at cybersecurity from the risk lens, you're going to really understand a lot more about why leadership looks at cyber the way they do, why they spend on cyber the way they do. It's all about risk. And there's the 4 quadrants of risk. You can look those up. But if you look at cyber in a risk framework, it really helps you, see the difference in just the actionable day-to-day and then what that strategic roadmap and leadership is looking for.
Well, I don't know if I can make it sound exciting. I mean, Lester, what do you think?
Well, what I was going to say is, in my experience, the most difficult role to hire for is actually on the risk side, so GRC specifically. And so I don't know if it's an issue of it doesn't have the same pizzazz of like a SOC analyst or a security architect. But I also think it's a skills gap more so in that you need somebody who understands the technology from a cybersecurity side, but then also can speak in terms that the business understands. And that lowest common denominator is risk, to Troy's point.
Yeah, I think that's something that if you're looking for future jobs in cybersecurity, consider risk, right? Consider governance and compliance. I don't think a lot of people really look at that entire group, GRC.
Yeah, probably not. I think most people have not necessarily rose-colored glasses, but definitely looking to do certain roles like hacking, pen testing, all the engineering work, network-related stuff. Not too many people will go the compliance route, but it's actually a route a lot of people that are very successful CISOs have gone. And the one part is you could be technical, you could not be technical, right? And you could still make it to a CISO role without the technical background that a lot of people normally expect you to have. Whether or not, if there's an argument if you should be technical or not as a CISO, I don't know.
I don't know. It's a conversation to have.
Yeah.
I mean, do you really need to be, if you're trying to become a CISO, do you need to be super technical or even have a technical background?
I think you have to know enough to be dangerous, but you have to have the talent on your team.
Yeah.
Right. If you don't have the talent on your team.
I put it this way. I've seen a lot of people come up through the ranks in other business functions that do very well as a CISO, as long as you have the analytical mindset and the stoic ability or the Socratic method to ask the right questions. I think that you can be successful here, but you have to understand also, what the goals of the attacks are and, what the attack surface is. If you're not technical, how can you really understand the ways that hackers take advantage of your business? Otherwise, you're just going to be, throwing money at the wall, hoping that something sticks. Or you have really good team members in the place of the security architecture team and the security operations center and other operational type roles that can help you figure that out. But so it's not saying you can't be successful, but one of the things that I attribute my success to is that I started very early in my career as a network engineer. I'm a certified routing engineer, and that understanding of TCP/IP and network protocols and all of the different network functionality is how I understand how attacks work, and it helped me in my career kind of get the opportunities. But it's different for everybody. It's what I love about this industry. There's not one set path to success here.
Yeah, I have similar background. I started as a Unix, Linux administrator and then network administrator. So having that deep hands-on, I think, has helped me really ask the right questions as I moved up into leadership.
So I think the point you made is super technical, right? And so where's that line? So the running joke for me is, which is not really a joke, it's an honest truth, is I haven't done hands-on keyboard work in over a decade.
Oh yeah, I don't think any of us have.
But I do think a minimal level of technical knowledge is required to be successful on the road. But I don't think you have to be super overkill about it. So, my undergrad's in music, as you guys know, right? Now, in fairness, my master's is in technology, and I came up a similar route as you, Damian. So, but I also think ultimately no two organizations are the same. So even higher ed, local government, which is my background, one organization might have more of a need for a technical leader versus one that requires more of a strategic, programmatic approach to the role. So.
I think it can be both, right? I think we do have some friends that are really, really technical. One of them was our first guest, Mike Manrod. Mm-hmm. If I look back at, some of the things I do, and I still like to put my hands on the keyboard, I try not to, simply because there are other people on my team that I think probably could do it faster and better. But at least I know enough to understand what some of that direction should be, right? What's possible. I also know if they're trying to, swindle me, and not that any of my employees would, but you wonder sometimes if you have a person at that senior leadership, whether they're being fed the right answers,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
if you're strong enough to ask the right questions to lead the team down the right path. Because as we know, and this is a question for you, Lester, as when you're at that senior leadership, how many times do you make the actual technical decisions for your department?
So preferably, my 2 cents, I try not to ever be in that position, because the way I phrase it, if I have to make the technical decision, the organization has bigger problems, right? And so, and also part of it too is I try to empower the people that are most impacted by those technical decisions. So if I have architects or engineers in place, making a product selection, they're the ones that are going to be impacted by that decision. I'm just looking for the outcome. Here's my prerequisites. Here's what the needs of the organization are. As long as the selection meets those criteria, then I try to, as much as possible, leave the decision-making to those individuals. So.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Damian, that you mentioned that, because I've actually heard in previous roles after I had been on the job for a while, it's like, other employees would come up to me and say, people can't BS you, they can't get anything by you. You see this stuff. And what happens is legacy employees tend to favor comfort over security. And so they explain away why you can't change something for all the reasons that they don't want to change. And turns out that they are just trying to protect their little kingdom, maybe their knowledge base, maybe their whatever they're working on, either for comfort or job protection. And when you can see through that, and you go like, no, that's not how this works. Technology has evolved. We can change that. We need to change that. Service accounts need to have rotated passwords, as an example. That's a very, controversial statement in some enterprises. Service accounts need to have their passwords rotated very regularly, at least annually, and they need to be complex. That shouldn't be controversial at all.
Well, that's for your own organization. How do you measure third-party risk when you're looking at vendors? Do you hold them to the same standard that you hold your own internal resources? And how do you measure that? I think that's the question.
Yeah, and can you? And can you? I mean, that's the thing. You don't have the visibility into a third party. They're going to show you their SOC 2 report. They're going to show you that they're doing things correctly. And unless you actually go hands-on and go on-site to your third parties and do some type of an audit, then you're not going to really know what they're doing behind the curtain. And so I don't know that you can really hold them accountable until something bad happens. And then, unfortunately, your legal team is going to be the one holding them accountable.
So along those lines, I can't begin to tell you how many times where I've engaged a third party and I ask for their SOC 2, or the organization does, and then they give whose ever cloud environment that they're sitting on. I'm like, no. Where's your SOC 2, right? But
yes.
But part of what we, in my last couple of jobs, have tried to do is, in efforts to hold third parties to the same standards, is at least disclose, and in the standard T's and C's, hey, here's our security standards that we're expecting all third parties to adhere to. And so that's a starting point, but to varying degrees of success, right? So
yeah. So I mean, back to this incident. I still don't like to use the B word.
Okay.
Yeah. But back to this incident. I think this is almost like a chain effect. So we have Salesforce, which is, a lot of organizations use Salesforce. They have a plugin or maybe a third-party app.
Salesloft.
Okay. And then there was an OAuth token to Drift.
Yeah.
Which was an AI chatbot thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, when I think about that, there's a few things that I'm concerned about. Right? One, M&A, right? A lot of companies go through mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures. If this was an acquisition, what happened through the acquisition, and was that all secured? And then two, the other thing that I've been trying to figure out is visibility to OAuth tokens. And do we have full control over whether those tokens are still needed? Should they be allowed? Because sometimes they give too much access into your environment. I can speak from the Google ecosystem, because within a Google ecosystem, there's a lot of users that just they're automatically allowed to add an OAuth token and access into their Gmail, for example, or calendar. Right? There's calendaring applications that use that OAuth token to access their calendar. But how many times do we, as an organization or as individuals, go back and review, should that still have access to it? And do they have their risk covered?
Well, even more fundamentally, how many organizations have a high degree of confidence that they know, in this case, treat tokens like an asset and can manage that, right? So whether we're talking about OAuth tokens or, AWS secrets, I mean, take your pick. And
APIs?
Yeah. But, these are unfortunately the challenges that still exist regardless of sector. So
I was thinking about this as I was preparing for the episode. And so we get a lot of Amazon packages at our house. And Amazon has it where they have an integration with like LiftMaster or obviously with Alexa, but you can link your Alexa to your garage door. And because of front porch theft or like porch pirates, whatever they call it, Amazon started this ability where if they were delivered to your house, the driver could open your garage and place the packages in your garage. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, that'd be awesome. But then I thought about it and I'm like, wait, hang on a second. If I let the Amazon driver into my garage, I've got tools, I've got all kinds of expensive stuff in the garage. Granted, there's nicer things inside, right? No crypto though. No crypto anywhere. But, to think that these tools are a few $100s and that someone that I don't know that works for a reputable company could have access to my garage strictly by having that feature is one issue to me. The other is what happens if someone gets access to that tool that they use to open the garage, right? And I think in a lot of ways, to me, that seems very comparable to what happened with Drift, Salesloft, and Salesforce. It's someone that's down the chain that you give access to at some point or another, and it's intended for good things, opening the garage to put my package in. But the reality is if that phone or device that they use to open the garage gets into the wrong hands, gets stolen, and they come drive to your house and they get access to it, how it works, I'm not sure, but if they can open your garage door, they can do a lot more damage inside your garage than if they just left the package on the front doorstep. So
yeah, that's a great analogy, actually, Fern. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense one-to-one with exactly what we're talking about here, because as a homeowner, you're taking some risk by letting Amazon have access to your garage. You understand that risk. You've kind of validated, man, I'll let them in there. I trust them enough to let them in my garage, as you mentioned, right? So you're given somewhat of trust. But if somebody steals that tool, a bad actor, a thief, takes that tool and then opens your garage and steals everything in your house, that's exactly like a third-party risk here with an OAuth token, right? API keys are the same, different mechanisms that you give trust to one company, but then bad actors intercept it or steal it and then get access to your data that shouldn't. So that's a very, very good analogy, on point.
Just to add to the analogy, so in that example, just off the top of your head, do you know everything that's in your garage?
No.
So that's number one. And then to Troy's point, there's certain tools in there that could actually help you get actually inside the house where all your cryptos, right, Fern? So,
yeah.
So this kind of goes back to what we were talking about originally. Like you used the example of APIs. I mean, decades, right? And we still have a problem along those lines, understanding what it has access to and then downstream risk associated with that. And it's fundamentally, in my opinion, about the fact that we don't treat these things, OAuth tokens, APIs, as assets.
So there's that part. And then the other part that I was thinking of is, like you said, if they get into the house, they can do a lot more damage. So there's damage that they can do initially in the garage, but I've got a couple reciprocating saws, I have an entire wall of DeWalt tools.
Are your Amazon packages valued more than your tools ever?
Sometimes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a risk thing, right? So maybe if I order a boombox, I don't know what a boombox costs these days. Let's say I got a stereo coming at $1,000 and I don't want that left on my porch. So that might be an opportunity. Allow you into my garage to leave it at one time. But if it's like toothpaste, I don't care. Leave that on my front porch. If somebody steals that, it's a lower risk than letting somebody into my garage with $1,000 tools.
But it doesn't have to just be your garage too, because like think of it, for example, like a lot of times when you have your like iPhone, kind of experiencing the world of iPhones, is whenever I connect to things, it says this tool would like to connect to your network and discover devices. I always click never allow, because I don't know what they can see that's on my network, that if someone were to get into their systems, they potentially could have access to my systems, right? So maybe I'm just a security pro in disguise, but I always say never allow, because the way I look at it is, if someone were to get into like the vacuum cleaner system or the speakers that we have in the house, and those can discover other devices on my network, they can get to the thermostat, they can get to other devices that could do damage, right? Maybe not as malicious as someone breaking in and doing it, but it's just something that I don't want to have to deal with. So I don't allow it. But you can't necessarily do that with chatbots, right? With Salesloft, with Salesforce, right? Or can you? I don't think you can.
Can you what? But say, well, I mean, if you just don't connect it, like what you're saying is, I don't connect anything.
Yeah,
right?
Because you can't do that, because they have to have access to it, right? They have to have access to these other tools through.
Yeah, and I think if you look outside of just this Salesforce incident, I think there's a lot of things that are interconnected today. So you need to take a look at, okay, where are those APIs connected? When's the last time you rotated even the API keys? The OAuth tokens we talked about, what's in your inventory and what's been allowed today, right? We don't know. Over time, these things kind of just build up, and it just works until somebody tries the door and it's open. Discover an API key that's sitting on the dark web that maybe you didn't know was there.
5 to 10 years ago, every single year you do an annual pen test, they would always find a server's account that had been either compromised or they compromised during the pen test. And so, I was so happy when this whole non-human identity space came out. Recently we started putting emphasis on discovering shadow accounts like OAuth tokens, API keys, servers accounts, and being able to inventory them. I think that's a very big blind spot for a lot of people in the security industry. So as Lester mentioned, having an accurate inventory of those assets, treating them as assets and inventorying them is the first step in securing them. But then back to Fern's point about limiting access, as you allow those OAuth and API integrations, you can set guardrails around what access and what data they have access to. So that, just making sure that you're being proactive and not just saying any, or give all access out of the box, being, fruitful with what that looks like is very important.
Okay, so I got a question for you, Troy. So what I heard was, if you're using SaaS applications, from what you said, what Lester said, there should be some form of audit, whether it's yearly, quarterly, there should be an audit that's in place to kind of prevent any sort of issues. But if you are an organization that works with another that happens to use Salesforce, and that Salesforce is connected to Salesloft, and then through Salesloft they're connected through Drift, that's like fourth party. It goes from third party to fourth party. So like, how exactly should someone that isn't a Salesforce company think about the risk beyond their organization, but more so how their organization's information is stored with like a Salesforce? Because if you're not directly connected to Salesloft and Drift, but you're almost like fourth party by way of them going through Salesforce and Salesforce containing your information, you can't necessarily audit, because that's just information that they've just collected.
That's a great question. And I think that it goes back to, our societal view on public information, right? So as you know, search engines collect data about you, and they know, how old you are, what your likes are, how many people live in your household. There's a lot of public data out there. And Salesforce, for a lot of companies, is their CRM, or their customer relationship management software. So they're storing, potential leads, who the contact is, what their email address is, what their phone number is. And they're doing all of that without the knowledge or consent of the person that they're collecting that data or inputting that data on and about. So that's why this breach is so important. And I think it is a breach. Unauthorized access that led to data being exfiltrated. That's a breach in my opinion. So this breach basically included I'm sure my information would have been in some of these databases because I was a CISO. I was a target client for some of the companies that were affected. And so, my name, my email address, my phone number was probably included in that data set. And there's really nothing I can do to prevent people from, collecting data about me on the outside from public sources. So I don't know if we have an answer for that fourth party data problem on this call, but I like to say, control what you can control. Inventory your API keys, your OAuth tokens, your service accounts, make sure they're rotated, make sure you have some kind of monitoring on them. So if, it goes from 5 kilobits per month data transfer to 10 gigs, I think there's a problem. So, there's a lot of things you can do to monitor those connections and just make sure you have a good inventory of them.
This may not be a very popular opinion, but given my background in local government for 21 years, let me just say on a personal note, I think there's some things that government's good at doing and some things that government isn't. But I do think, so like, for example, the direction that we're headed with the software bill of material and some of the other, governmental initiatives, if you will, until the government requires this, at least in this country. I don't know, to your point, Troy, if there's a whole lot we can do as consumers. But what I can say is with this recent Salesforce issue, it's interesting to see some of the vendors in my ecosystem have taken a proactive approach to say, hey, we've been impacted by this. We're disclosing this information. We want to meet with you. One vendor in particular, but I know I'm not supposed to mention vendor names here.
Not around here.
So, so there might be things indirectly that we can do through vendor relationships, and preferring vendors who openly disclose that information as opposed to who don't, right, in the form of business, but. So that might be something along those lines, but it is tough. And then I think some organizations, if you're larger, you may have the ability to demand or at least successfully request fourth party information. But if you're a small or medium business, good luck with that, right? And so, because it's unfortunately all about the dollar, it's been my experience.
Well, you said only one organization reached out, right? Or told
that
you.
I'm aware of.
So, okay, that you're aware of. But according to the reports, there's over 700 organizations affected.
Yeah, I've seen some of my peers sharing some of the outreach emails in our private channels, showing that a big number of those 700 have reached out and said how it affected them and what they're doing to work with the teams looking into the issue. So I think, Fern, it depends on if you were affected by that particular relationship, but I think that those companies are probably being very proactive. I will use the CrowdStrike example, and that's a vendor name, but it's a very big outage a year ago that happened, and it affected the whole world. Delta Airlines famously went down for some time, but George Kurtz got on the news the next morning. They stayed in front of that. They were, walking hand in hand with their customers, and it gave confidence that they knew what they were doing and they were being proactive. So that created customer loyalty. And I think that's exactly what we see here with this issue. Even though it wasn't those 700 companies' fault, they were being transparent and proactive. And that always resonates with CISOs, which is a trust relationship.
So it makes me wonder how many of those that didn't reach out really know that they were using Drift and Salesloft. They may not know. Because how many times do you have shadow IT? So you got users that go out and, do their own thing, do their own connectivity.
You mean vendors also have shadow IT other than us?
Everybody's got shadow IT.
I don't know. It's interesting. I think there's just a lot of people that were affected, and hopefully more people come forward. But I know Troy said like the vendors that were affected are kind of stepping up. But I saw that like Drift shut everything down, and they've essentially halted everything, took down pretty much any remnants on the web that they had, and they emailed clients and said, hey, we're doing this, but they worded it in a way that made it sound like they were going out of business. The reality is I don't think they're going out of business, but I think they shut down to kind of like stop the flooding, right? Sort of thing, close all the doors to stop the leaks. Maybe is another way to think of it, but I've seen a lot of other tools that are very comparable saying, hey, if you're a Drift customer, you should come over here. And it's like very much maybe ambulance chasing. But I don't know. I mean, so like to Troy's point, the larger vendors are coming out saying, hey, like we were involved in this. But I'd be curious to see if anyone's heard from Drift that was directly impacted as a result because of using Drift. I haven't seen that.
Fern, that reminds me, like companies, and for many, many years up until now, we've been very cavalier about announcing breaches or thinking that we could be affected by a breach. This goes into the ransomware story and everything. Companies just, they fail to invest in cyber protections because they say that can never happen to me. I'm not a target. But this just goes to show that it can happen to anyone. And if it does happen to you, it could cause you to, face substantial financial burden or go out of business. We do see companies go out of business due to ransomware attacks or cyber incidents like this, especially when they're such high profile cases. And so I just highly recommend companies continue to look at and invest in not just cyber, but, risk investment into their companies, whether they're a vendor or an enterprise or public, state, local. You have to be looking at this stuff. It's important. You can't just stick your head in the sand anymore like an ostrich and think it's not going to happen to you, because it's happening to everyone.
So maybe what are the steps going forward for people that obviously are using what might be considered like a double-edged sword with you're going to have these OAuth token, or to some extent you have an OAuth token risk, right?
Yeah.
So maybe
I don't think you're going to be able to just block them. Right. That's like saying
block
you
MFA.
can't. Yeah, block everything. Don't use cloud. Don't use APIs. And then you're just not connected. So that's not going to help the business. That's not going to help anyone. And so, cutting out these tokens are probably not going to work in the short term or long term. But what you could do is look for try to inventory what you have, because you can absolutely pull down what tokens have access to your systems.
Okay.
And audit those, right? And do you look at them at all? I think most organizations probably don't even look at them at all. But really mature organizations will do annual access reviews at minimum. Some do it quarterly.
Right? Or at least split the difference, right? So even if you're a large organization, you probably have limited resources. Identify which OAuth token or what services leverage OAuth tokens, and then prioritize based off of impact to the organization, risk, et cetera, et cetera. And again, this goes back to our initial conversation about putting things in terms of risk that the organization understands. And so even if you don't have the ability to do quarterly reviews, look at the most impactful enterprise level services within your organization and focus on that for starters, right? And so it's still better than nothing.
Risk priority, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's a perfect example of prioritizing how you would assess. Just take a look at it. If it's the highest risk, it's got the access to the most amount of information. And for a lot of organizations, Salesforce is their number one data repository.
Yeah. So, okay. So we'll say that there's no going around OAuth, right? You're going to have to use it to some extent. So you just can't cut it off. My question is, security practitioners now have to take a use case for the audits and the potential financial cost of doing that to a business, right? Or business leaders, boards potentially, right?
Yeah, but I don't know how difficult that is. It sounds difficult, but let me challenge anyone who's listening to this, watching. We just talked about it. Started this off saying, hey, maybe you should try look into being a risk analyst. Mm-hmm. I bet 90% of the people watching, listening to this have a Gmail account. When's the last time you looked through the OAuth tokens that you've issued on your personal Gmail account?
Oh, don't ask that question.
No, that's a fair question, right?
Yeah.
And what do those OAuth tokens have access to? So I think it's a pretty good exercise to do it on your personal accounts and see what kind of risk your account is on. Do you have these old tokens that have access to your entire email?
Absolutely. And in my last company, we had one person on the identity team. His sole job was looking after single sign-on and OAuth tokens, API keys. And I think that, if you're working in the industry, in the identity space, this could be one of those things that could really differentiate you on your team. going out and trying to do this inventory, presenting this data to your leadership, showing potential risk. Maybe you've over provisioned or given too many permissions to one of these connections. Imagine showing up to your boss's desk with a report that says, here's the inventory of all of our connections, and here's the risky ones that I recommend we probably should secure. I mean, you're going to look like a rock star. It's going to go well for your career. So another opportunity.
Yeah, if you proactively did it. Could you imagine, Lester, somebody comes just out of the blue? Hey, Mr. CISO, look what I did over the weekend.
Yeah, that's happened to me on more than one occasion.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Not specific.
Who are they? Because I want to hire them.
Right. No, so at multiple jobs, right? So whether it's like over provisioning of file access or anything in between. So yeah, that has happened to me multiple times. And you do your due diligence and you take it seriously, right? And so, and you also keep the person who notified you in the loop, so that way they know that you're taking it seriously and it's not creating a negative kind of culture within the organization. Like, hey, I brought this to the attention of the CISO and they just blew me off, right? But one thing that I wanted to mention in terms of specifically the CISO role is at every single organization. So I'm in my third stint as a CISO, but every organization I've worked for in this capacity, you build alliances. And so one of them is internal audit, right? And so as we find these sort of things, as we discover systematic or enterprise-wide challenges within the organization of a cyber nature, trying to build that into and having the dialogue along those lines to ensure that this isn't just swept under the rug, right? So you can't do everything at once, but you can prioritize, certainly to your point, Damian, prioritize what is the biggest risk to the organization and what you should focus your limited resources on.
So I think, honestly, you bring up a good point that, what happens when an employee brings something up to the CISO that doesn't get actioned on and increases risk. That causes a lot of friction. I've seen that in the past. Well, what also happens when the CISO brings it up to their boss and nothing happens? These create significant, friction areas for the employee. So if you are bringing stuff up to the CISO and they're not actioning it, not protecting the business, that's a whole different can of worms. And maybe we can do an episode on that, Damian, where we talk about how it is to sit in the seat and have to deal with some of the stuff that's brought to your attention versus, being an employee and finding something really interesting and taking it to the CISO and you feel like they're not doing anything about it.
One of the soft skills, so when we go through interns and they're coming in, we do a lot of soft skills training. One of them is actually managing up and communicating across peers, because I'm finding a lot of people entering the workforce just don't understand how to, really manage up and build up to your boss's expectations, and also speak with their peers and figure that out. So I think just the way this next generation has been brought up through COVID, everything has been, siloed or individualized, where they're not communicating enough. And I feel like, Troy, what you're saying is, how do you really get that in front of somebody who can make a difference, get that report to them? But then also in our seat, how do we take that message? Because the one thing I don't want to do is make it feel like it wasn't important. Exactly. Because it absolutely is.
Don't discourage that effort. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how little it takes to create a negative, perspective of cybersecurity. If you have one or two of these sort of events occur, all of a sudden, all the work you're doing towards trying to build a culture of cybersecurity, where cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility within the org, just goes out the window as a result. So, yeah.
We talked about this with communicating over text.
Oh yeah,
and the thumbs up emoji. Like if somebody sends you a message and you thumbs up it, is that dismissive or is that an acknowledgement? How do you use that?
Yeah, I think everybody here knows my wife as well, Shannon, who's also a CISO, which is awesome. But, I can't tell you how many times that I'm misunderstood over text because I say something a certain way and it's taken a different way. It's funny. You got to be careful with the context. Sometimes I'll just text her like, hey, just give me a call. I want to clarify that because I don't want you to think I meant it the wrong way. So it happens even with, people that have known each other for 20 years. So imagine, somebody that you're just starting to work with.
Yeah. My emoji game sucks. So, yeah.
But you do the thumbs up. You do a lot of thumbs up and you do a lot of emojis. I can go back.
That's true.
I can find messages. I get a lot of emojis from you.
So you'll need to give me some feedback about that first. So.
I think it works for me. It's fine because when someone has an iPhone, it usually says delivered red, so you kind of know what they've seen or what they haven't seen. So to me, it's like, if I haven't heard from someone and it says delivered, maybe they haven't seen it. But if I get like the emoji and like it's the laughing face, or if it's like the face palm, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, he's the baby of the group. So
yeah,
compared to the three of us.
Yeah, I am the baby, and I use a lot of baby emojis. If you look at the stuff that I send, I've got a laughing face, smiley face, like bicep showing, like I'm on the emoji game for sure.
My 14-year-old daughter is my translator into this new generation of whatever language they speak. But now I'm having to learn the K-pop Demon Hunter languages and songs and emojis because that's all the pop culture references today. It's just all the
K-pop
Demon
Hunter,
the language.
So. The language is changing because we had this text going about different terms now that we're just learning from our kids. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if that gets into the workforce and the workplace where we just don't understand. It's a totally different language and, culture that's coming up. It's concerning for me, like just trying to communicate and feel like, hey, I'm cool. I know I'm old, but I'm still cool.
Well, I guess we'll know if old dogs can learn new tricks soon, right? Isn't that kind of the phrase? It's like when you have multi-generational workforces in the same building because, they have to be in the office now 3 to 5 days a week. You have people that are 21 that are saying skibbity riz cap and all these other things. You're just like, what the hell are you just saying? It wants to be like a translator, like a Google translator. There's probably gonna be like a new like Duolingo app language for like Gen Z, but I don't know. It's definitely hard talking to my kids sometimes because I feel like my kids can't be this dumb, but they're just saying what they hear, right? I'm sure every parent has that same thought. It's like, and it reminds me of my parents when I was little. They would say, well, back in my day. And now I'm the one saying, well, back in my day. So
Imagine being Lester. Imagine being Lester over at ASU and having all these young folks around him that are speaking a whole different language. It's like, wow. But I do envy that position. ASU is a great school. My nephew goes there, as a matter of fact. And ASU is a phenomenal campus.
Well, thank him for his tuition money. So, but, in my case, my challenge is I don't have kids. And so, and I know you guys know this about me, but my original degree was music ed and I was going to be a band teacher until I realized, I guess I didn't like kids, just to be honest. And so I don't have that context. And so this verbiage, this lingo is just lost upon me. So.
Oh, don't worry, it's lost on us too.
Yeah. So if you happen to know Lester and you want to work for Lester, you can't be using the slang terms. You have to use.
Oh, you can use whatever. Just be prepared to, for the quizzical looks and then having to explain yourself in a more traditional English fashion. So, yeah.
Well, we're getting closer to the end of time here. So definitely don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of Gen Z talk. But I think so. We've covered a lot of things. And so the first thing we've covered was the breakdown, right? Between Drift, Salesloft to Salesforce, third party, fourth party risk, right? So we covered that. We talked about OAuth token risk, how the fact that you can't just shut these off, but instead of shutting them off or, scorched earth approach, do an audit, right? Or have an audit, whether it's quarterly or yearly, and understand within a business context or even personal, like you said, Damian, for Gmail, is what sort of authorization do these third-party apps have to your information or your business that could be detrimental, right? So we talked about that. We talked about some of the hidden layers with third-party, fourth-party, the fact that maybe you have no control over the fourth-party aspect of it, but you do have control over third. And when you control what you can control, like what Troy said, if you, by doing that, you do the audit, you have a better understanding of the total potential, right, attack surface that you are either exposing or cleaning up as a result of how you look at these third-party risk, right? So maybe now it's just more so the road ahead. So not to get too specific, but maybe some of the things are the non-human identity, right? What are some of the areas that people can start looking at now that might give them a better understanding for the future? As you know, because specifically in this case, there's a lot of tools out there that understand context. They understand what users are doing, who should be doing what they shouldn't be doing, right? But in this case, it's almost like if someone went around the firewall, doesn't matter how good your policies or rules are, they can get around it, right? So what are some of the things that people can start looking into now to kind of maybe plan ahead for mitigating the risk? Maybe either with this type of third-party risk situation or other things that are kind of like fourth-party even.
I don't think it's, you said they're going around the firewall. I don't think they're going around the firewall. What we've done here is we've opened it up, and then somebody took the key and walked right through. Right? That's essentially what's happening here. So I think if you're looking forward to some of that stuff, is really right now just trying to inventory maybe where your data is, where your crown jewels are, understand where the highest risk could be for you personally or your organization, and then inventorying the keys, right? The tokens and the certificates that you might have floating out there. When's the last time you rotated a password, service account password? We seem to ignore all the non-human identity, so I think that's maybe a topic we can cover in a future episode, because those get ignored. We think of identities as people, but there's non-human identities too.
So I think, Damian, I would say that non-human identity or NHI companies, they've come up in the last 3 to 5 years, pretty prominently. And it used to be a nice to have, but they are now a must have. And I do think one day you will get that from your platform provider. I think that some of these NHI companies are going to get acquired by some of the larger platforms, but you definitely should be looking at this technology no matter what size your company is, because they're going to help you, plug in and inventory all these things, because you just find things you never knew existed. And I love visibility. I love when I find things I didn't know about, because then I can secure them, right?
Just real quick, so maybe a future topic. So to build upon that, everybody and their mother has been working towards a zero trust environment, right? And so anybody who's been serious about that should have already been thinking about non-human identity, right? So device identity, application identity.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because we did talk about zero trust architecture on a previous episode. I don't know how many people are actually, I think a lot of large organizations are probably thinking forward to it and legacy VPN replacement, but I don't think it's as widespread as it probably should be.
And so to your point, maybe they say they're working towards that, but they're really still focused on individual, personal, human identity, right? And then the other thing, just to throw this out for a future topic with somebody else, it would be, or me if you invite me back, is as everybody's starting to look at agentic AI, how many people have plans in place to asset and inventory agents that are acting on behalf of your organization?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? So if we can't even keep track of assets today, how can you keep track of all these agentic AI agents that are going to just spin up?
But they're going to be working autonomously or semi-autonomously on behalf of your organization if done properly, right? So, and
then you have a rogue one you forgot about. It's still out there working.
Yeah. Absolutely. And do you treat it as a human identity or do you treat it as a machine identity? That's been a big question in the industry as well.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of work for you guys.
Unless you're all retired by then again.
Yeah.
And Fern, I think the last thing I wanted The last thing I wanted to mention was that, if you're a company also building software, so if you're a company that has a software business, if you look inside the code, we have found so many hundreds of times where people check in code with key pairs in the code. So it goes out into a public repository where people can scan the internet and find the API keys or these secrets. And so that's just as much part of non-human identity as anything else. So you need to be scanning your static code and your dynamic code so that you can find where you may have accidentally, checked something into a public repo with a key pair out there. We see this all the time. And then as soon as hackers grab it, they're able to jump in and get the data before you can even blink an eye. So, it's got to be proactive and looking at all of these non-human identities. Agentic is a great topic I think we should spend a lot more time on.
So basically what you're saying is if anyone's out there vibe coding, they need to be more cautious about what they ship, right? Because a lot of that stuff maybe might not see multiple layers of inspection, right? Or have multiple people inspecting it because it's, we just do it on the vibes. But I don't personally know anyone that would claim to vibe code, but I'd be curious to see like how something that was, we'll say, vibe coded at like a small startup potentially compares to an enterprise organization that has a number of like mature systems in place. But I don't know. Mm-hmm. So least privilege is important. Auditing is another one. What else would there be? So audit, least privilege, and
secret scanning discovery. You got to be able to discover the ones you may not know about.
Just overall asset management.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that's usually everything, right? But I think, if you can't protect what you don't understand, or you can't protect what you aren't aware of, right? But maybe the walking away from this episode would be more so for people to go back and start looking at these OAuth tokens and what they have access to, and maybe what sort of impact they could have to the business if compromised. So maybe the exercise, like a tabletop exercise, would then be to look at all these and kind of understand if someone were to have these tokens and use them maliciously, what could the impact be? Take that to your CISO. Find yourself with a new title, senior director, see more money in the bank. So I would say if you're listening, do those things and you might just thank us later because you might get a raise. I don't know. It is customary for us to go around the room. So first we'll go to Troy, then we'll go to Damian, then I'll go, and then we'll leave the final closing thoughts to the one and only Lester.
I just want to say thanks, Lester, for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you on and talking with you. So thank you for that. And second of all, I love what you said, Fern. You can't protect what you don't know about. Discovery should be my middle name because that is the key to being successful in this industry, is constantly looking for things you don't know about because they're out there.
Yeah, that's thanks, Lester, for joining us. I know it's not easy to sit here and go off script and just, talk about stuff and joke about your second retirement. But anyways, for those of you who listen to this episode, I think that tip of, hey, let's figure out what OAuth tokens are out there. And even if you do it on your personal accounts, that's actually a pretty good exercise. I'm going to go do that right now. I usually do it once a year on my own accounts, but I'll go take a look at it. We also have a lot of old accounts that we probably haven't used in a decade. Go through, if you haven't used them, it's probably another attack vector people can use. Find them and shut them down.
Find them, shut them down, or at least let people know that they exist, right? So I think what I took away from this one is the audit part, right? Understanding OAuth tokens and the access that they have and the damage that it could do, because not to point fingers, but maybe there was a situation where someone could have done this sooner and they would have seen that the impact downstream to the supply chain would have really caused significant damage. But now we're there, right? We've kind of, it could have been stopped. I'm sure plenty of vendors say that they would have stopped it if their tool was in place. So at the end of the day, security is about people, and them making the effort to look at certain things may have prevented it, may have not. But the reality is something got missed. Something was overlooked, which is typically what happens in these situations. So take the time, review what you've got, take it to leadership, and you might just end up on top with that. So Lester, leave us with the closing words.
Thanks for having me on the show. Longtime fan. So
A whole 19 episodes, long time.
absolutely.
Long-time fan, first-time guest.
And then how many subscribers do you guys have?
I think we're just under 4,000 right now, so pretty close.
All right. So, but I guess my takeaway is from a practitioner perspective, everything we've talked about has been around risk, right? And so I think for people wanting to get into business, really give risk a chance. And so, because there's obviously a need there. But then based off of what we were talking about earlier, we need to then translate everything we've talked about and operationalize it within our organization. Obviously, you can't boil the ocean, but be strategic about it. So review of OAuth tokens, API keys, service accounts, like Troy talked about, put that in your GRC, and at least review that once a year, operationalize that. And so the more that we can do that, especially with third and fourth party vendors, I would encourage them to take that seriously as well too. And then if we can take those operational steps, everybody's going to be better off.
And with that, we'll see you next Monday. Thanks for listening.